we have a name, as do the Mail and the Telegraph. We have a birth certificate, um, and people have been looking into it. People have been journalists have uh, contacted the family. So it's in play, and a lot of people do know it, but we have not been able to substantiate it to the degree that you need to publish.
You were very, very early on to this story, Starmer's big secret. Do you know anything more? Or are you under pressure legally not to reveal more?
Well, we've both been in the game a long time. You know the rules. If you can't stand it up completely, you can't run the story. So we have a name, as do the Mail and the Telegraph. We have a birth certificate, and people have been looking into it. Journalists have contacted the family. So it's in play, and a lot of people do know it, but we have not been able to substantiate it to the degree that you need to publish.
Okay, so to clarify, would you say that this story is about the shape of Keir Starmer's family?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way of phrasing it.
And do you believe it's in the public interest to reveal it?
So Starmer's been very careful. For instance, he insists, and the media generally goes along with it, that his kids aren't named. And most lobby journalists are respectful of that because they're family people, and politicians' kids do get a lot of can get bullied and difficulties. So they don't name the kids, and Starmer doesn't ever use the children in his campaigning. Although he did do a video during the COVID, which he made out was from his home with pictures of the children in the background on the bookshelf,
Yes.
which was Lord Ali's penthouse in Covent Garden. So he sometimes does cross that line, but in general, he doesn't use the children for political purposes. Now, you might think that's very wise and fair enough, or he might have a reason for not wanting to publicize his children.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a bit insane that we can be talking about the Prime Minister of this country and the media will argue that they won't name the children. I think that is a bit nuts, to be completely honest. But I guess for me, Paul, it's because I've just lived through all of these years of there being absolutely no respect for Boris Johnson's personal life whatsoever. I mean, you could also argue Boris Johnson has been very private when it comes to his family. He's never put his kids out there in the public domain and desperately begged for those children to be protected. Now, I'm sorry, it was Labour politicians that spent about 4 years using every tiny detail of Boris Johnson's personal life, not only to embarrass him and humiliate him and call him disgusting and make jokes about the number of children that he has. I mean, I can dig all of those up. You remember them. It's all been going on. But also, Paul, to try and make him lose his job as well. I mean, this wasn't just harmless digs about his personal life. It was all about driving him from office.
Well, it added to the pressure, but it was basically to smear his character, really. And Boris was always very careful to say, "I'm not an angel," and he never discussed his private life. So, the comparison between how the media treated Boris and how they're treating Starmer is quite something, though.
So just before we move on to the generalities of this sleaze scandal, just want to clarify a couple of things that you may or may not know. Lord Ashcroft, he's been trying to reveal this, hasn't he, for some time?
Yeah, and he does name the children in his book Red Knight,
Yes.
which I believe he's got a paperback coming out, which is going to have some more additions, the paperback version. He has he in action and in his book Red Queen, which was
Angela
about
Rayner.
Angela Rayner, he references a story, and this is we dug it out and used it. He references a story about a senior Labour politician putting Labour HQ in a panic because they were worried about a story that's going to come out about an affair and a love child. Now, you can make the inference that you required there. Who would Labour HQ be panicking about during a campaign? having a love child. So that's what really triggered us looking into it, to be honest.
Because I guess you'd say people are unlikely to care, Paul, if it was, Pat McFadden or a member of the shadow
Right,
cabinet. That's
right,
not going to
right.
panic them, is it?
It's not going to panic. It's not going to panic Labour because he's not front and centre of a campaign. With Starmer, it might be different.
Okay, very, very, very interesting. And then Andrew Pearce today referring to the publication of that updated book and saying that it has, quote, triggered alarm bells at number 10. So I think we can certainly say, can't we? They're talking about this, they're worried about this, and all the Westminster journalists are talking about this.
When we were covering it, when we were sort of shaking the tree a bit before the election, I bumped into a former Labour MP in a pub who knew the story. He knew it, who knew exactly what we were getting at. And he just said, "You're not going to make it stick," quite confidently.
Mm.
And I do wonder if the people concerned don't make a comment and don't confirm anything, I think the story can stay buried, frankly.
But first, it's the best time of year. Football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US, NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that, the glorious kind of fantasy football lineups is back too. So it's where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the group chat. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench, because let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. So that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for a date night, weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. And no one wants a surprise nose or ear hair making a guest appearance on game day, right? So look at this. The Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming game. And 2 free gifts today. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag Premium Gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men. I'm one of them who trust Manscaped, and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. All you need to do is use the code Outspoken, that's at checkout, and you'll get 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So 20% off and free shipping when you use the code Outspoken at www.manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. I mean, you can imagine how I feel about this, Paul, because last year I was subjected to, as you well know, a complete smear campaign to destroy my career and actually my life based on total lies. And they were complete lies, and they were investigated, and they were proven to be lies. And I always knew they were lies, and I always said they were lies, and I already always told my employees that they were lies. But the mainstream media in the left were quite happy to jump on this story. The Guardian, the Daily Mirror, and I find that bizarre. I mean, at that point, I'm a presenter at GB News. I'm not Prime Minister.
No, and I think you did get some apologies, I seem to recall,
Yes.
didn't you?
Yes, from the Guardian and the Daily Mirror, just for the record.
Yeah. So that,
but you get the point that I'm making, don't you? I mean, how can they say that my private life is subject to public interest and the Prime Minister isn't? I just think there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, but I think it is worth you pointing out. Sorry, you go, Paul.
My argument on the situation, and generally with politicians, is it speaks of character. And if you're going to lie to your wife, you're going to lie to the voters, and that is a character type. If you're going to lie to the person you give the most sacred vows to, you're going to lie to the voters. So I think there is always a case for looking into politicians' character. Whether the media agrees or not
Hmm.
is another matter altogether.
And look, having gone through this, I know you and I differ somewhat now on some of these media regulations, specifically around whether people should be named once arrested, for example, before being charged with a crime. Having gone through it, I have a very different view on this to what I previously did. But there's no alleged illegality here, is there? So it would be a straight question of, does the Prime Minister have a right to privacy? And I think it is worth you pointing out that privacy is now something that does very often stop journalists in this country running true stories.
Oh, all the time, all the time. Even in scandals that would normally have been reported, as recently as a few years ago, the privacy issue. If you start asking questions of celebrities or politicians, you may get a legal note, pretty sharpish, from a law firm saying, our client has a human right to privacy, Article 10, I think it is, and for a lot of media organizations, it's problematic.
Yeah,
no, we need a American style First Amendment, where freedom of the press is absolute.
Well, with that, I actually do completely I agree with you. But that would also mean that we could no longer have contempt of court and that sort of thing. It would mean a total fundamental change of the system, which I agree with. But look, the other thing is, Paul, it's not just Starmer's personal life that you have been looking into. You at Guido Fawkes, I have to congratulate you. You have put the mainstream media to shame. Since this administration has come in. Sleaze scandal after sleaze scandal exposed by you. You're a small operation. I mean, you're great, but you're a small operation. These are the types of stories you would usually think that mainstream newspapers, Paul Brand at ITV, Channel 4 News, you would think they would all be over this story. They don't seem to be. But some
the Lord Ali stuff, they did follow on with, to be fair. They were a little bit slower, but they cottoned on in the end, all apart from the BBC, of course. And I don't think it got the same kind of coverage on the Channel 4 and other TV news that it did in the press.
No, and I mean, this is a genuine scandal. And I'm not just talking about the living arrangements. I mean, you revealed, for example, the connections that Lord Ali has previously had with Assad. Now, you had to do that simply by going through and looking at his public comments in the House of Lords.
Normal research.
Which all journalists should have been doing. That's the first thing. The second thing is, Starmer clearly thinks he did something wrong because he has now today agreed to pay back £6,000 worth of expenses. I think it includes the Taylor Swift tickets, for example, on the same day that the House of Lords is now investigating Lord Ali for breaches of their code of conduct.
There's also just a point of principle. If a businessman got £50,000 worth of tickets and events and goods like glasses and clothes, that would be a benefit in kind, a taxable benefit in kind. I don't quite understand why MPs are, not paying tax on all these donations. You and I would have to.
Yeah, totally. Well, there's a lot of things they get, though, isn't there, Paul, that you and I don't get. But again, to me, this story, it's about the hypocrisy, isn't it? We thought Labour were going to be different because they promised us they were going to be different. And in fact, it feels like they're operating as the worst type of champagne socialists.
I certainly do wonder how you get to spend 30,000 on suits. I mean, I have a made-to-measure suit. It costs £1,000. How many suits did he get? Who did he buy them off? They £30,000 goes a long way in a man's wardrobe, I think. Unless you're on stage and a rock star, I don't think we got value for money for his.
And Starmer's rich. I mean, people forget this. He's got the gold-plated pension, doesn't he, from the state because of his role at the DPP, and there was a specific law that had to go through to get him that pension.
That's right.
He's got property. I mean, this is a guy valued at over £10 million.
Yeah, I'd say the house is worth a good few million. He had a successful legal career. You know, in public service, he was one of the highest paid public servants. They had to introduce a special law to deal with his pension. It was so big, the pot. Yeah, he's not poor. I do think there is some kind of sense of entitlement there, isn't there? You know, I know it caught on Victoria Sponger, but the wife getting involved as well. We were told before the election that she was a humble NHS worker. Well, she seems to have got the high life of some haute couture, hasn't she?
Well, yes, and she actually turned up at London Fashion Week and sat in the front row in designer outfits, which very much felt like this is our new approach. There is a post-election approach. And look, in some ways, it's nice, isn't it, that we have a, you know, wife of the Prime Minister who's public. But I think going back to the original story, what was fascinating is that there was a marked change. You referred to it in the podcast with the bombshells, that all of a sudden, as soon as the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph started to suggest, where's Vicky? The disappearing wife. I remembered I made a video about that. All of a sudden, she was out with a huge amount of force, and it was very public. I mean, it all started, do you remember, with that picture on Instagram, loved up picture on Instagram during the Taylor Swift concert, and from there was a marked change. So it was very clear they wanted to shut down the rumours, but I guess it hasn't worked.
Well, what the lobby suspects about Lord Ali's property, they don't really buy into. I don't think any of us really buy into. It was for the son to do his revision for his GCSEs. That was he in the doghouse, and was he kicked out? Was he, you know, using the bedrooms at the penthouse? You know, that's what they're suspicious of. Was he not under the same roof as Victoria?
Well, yes, indeed. And I had learned that there were mainstream newspaper journalists looking into the story before the election that Starmer and his wife were, shall we say, living separate lives for a period of time. But look, obviously, hopefully, they've sorted that out. But Paul, you're just back from the Conservative Party conference, and quite a fun little row has broken out between Robert Jenrick, the man who I think is going to win the Conservative leadership contest, and a certain Nigel Farage. So here is Robert on stage today.
The country needs a leader. Instead, with Starmer, we've got an undertaker. And what about the cabinet? What about our new cabinet? Well,
I'm literally complete.
Rachel Reeves. As wooden as Pinocchio. And only barely more honest. And then we've got Ed Miliband. Whoever tells you the grown-ups are back in charge, look at Ed Miliband. A Wallace missing his grommet. And then, there's David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary. Living proof that there is a more annoying LBC presenter than James O'Brien. But seriously, friends.
But Nigel Farage, he is not having any of it. Watch this on GB News today.
And his party, Reform UK, claiming they want to make the party redundant. What do you mean? They want to make the party redundant.
They want to make Reform redundant, not Tories. Yeah. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and he wants me to retire. Jenrick says we want Farage to retire.
That's ageist.
Well, there's not a cat's chance in hell of that, let me assure you. They're delusional. They're delusional. They think, let's get another leader, which, by the way, would be the sixth leader since 2016. Let's get a new leader, come out with some different policies, and somehow the public will all say, aren't they wonderful? We're going to come back to them. And what they don't understand is it's rather like a relationship. You know, if you keep letting the other side down, in the end, the relationship's broken.
So, what is your take on that, Paul?
Candidates, the question, what are you going to do about my friend Nigel? And they don't have a realistic answer. And I think partly it's because they can't, at this stage where they're trying to win the votes of Conservative Party members, there's not a lot of love for Nigel. He's given them a great drubbing in the election. caused the biggest and worst result they've ever had. So I think what they're saying now when they're running for election and what they'll do pre-general election are not necessarily the same. Jenric's game plan is to deny the space to Nigel, to out-reform. I don't think the voters are going to buy that. They don't trust the Tories. The Tories said for years they were going to stop the boats, and they were not just unsuccessful. The situation seemed to have got worse. We had more boats coming. And if they don't have a realistic game plan for a deal with Nigel, they're going to have the same result in this coming general election they had in the last one. They're going to get thrashed.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, no one impressed me on stage today. It's obviously been a really interesting few days for Kemi Badenoch too, although a lot of people have focused on her negative moments. But Paul, there's been some good moments. I mean, she's going for it. She's saying that 5 to 10% of our civil servants should actually be put in jail. Now, I believe it. I actually believe she's right, but it's quite a major thing to say. Watch this and I'll get you to react off the back.
It is not all civil servants. I don't want people to get me wrong. I think that civil servants are like everybody else. They come in to do a job, and I would say about 10%
Okay,
of
so
them
I am
are
going to
absolutely
just
magnificent.
speak
And
for
the trick to
Kemi
being a good
Badenoch
minister is to
therefore,
find the
but
good
she
ones
said
quickly, bring them
that
close,
5
and
to
try and get the bad
10%
ones
of
out of your
civil
department
servants
as
she
quickly as
thought should
possible.
probably be in jail, and that was because they were breaking the Official Secrets Act effectively and leaking.
Well, I'm not gonna want my civil service contacts to be jailed for leaking. I'm afraid.
No, very good point.
I think a lot of them should be fired because, particularly in the Home Office, they actively frustrated the elected government. They were running the administrative state, as they call it now, was running its own agenda, which was not the government's agenda and not what the voters wanted. We did stories about the private chat rooms that civil servants use, where they're actively frustrating and openly saying that they are frustrating the will of the government. It's a problem that we've got a lot of wokeness in the civil service, and particularly for a Conservative government, it's very difficult. So I think maybe the idea of a supposedly neutral civil service has to go, and we'll be like the Americans and have a partisan civil service through changes. So you have people who are aligned with the elected government's viewpoint and policy and manifesto when you have a change of government, and that way you might get some things done.
Do you think there's a possibility of a Prime Minister Farage in 2029? Because I know some people say I'm crazy, Paul, but I genuinely do.
Well, I think I actually bumped into Nigel's aide when I was coming back from Birmingham. He was going up to watch the football. He's an Aston Villa supporter. And I was having a chat with him. And he was saying that two things that struck me. He said that the thing about reform is now the membership of reform, including himself, believe they can win seats. And the voters that will believe it as well. They've seen 5 MPs. It's a tipping point, because the argument that the Tories used to use that it's a wasted vote and you'll let Labour in, that's gone. It's not a wasted vote, and so that means the obstacle to voting for reform in the next general election of it's a wasted vote, they're not going to get elected, has gone. In some ways, Nigel's task is going to be easier next time.
Yeah. I think you're completely right. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are. You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and I've put some of the links in the show notes below this video. Keep watching our Outspoken clips to support this independent news venture with no spin, no bias, and no censorship, unlike the MSM. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.